Okay, so hopefully in your office by now you have the Science Day kits. They're in these backpacks, which is kind of nice, different than the boxes, a little bit more usable. And there's 3 activities that you can find in the different boxes. So you'll want to just unpackage them. And in there, you're going to have a youth guide, which really every kid needs one or needs copies of one. And so that's a little bit different than before. There's a lot of actual work that's happening in these workbooks this time. So you either would need to make copies or one per group. So, and honestly, based on the activities, groups could vary in size. I suggest 2 to 3 maximum, but I know that that may not be feasible for what you're doing on the county. So, and then there's also a facilitator's guide. And the great thing about this is I think there's some opportunities for you to give this to a volunteer, youth leader, somebody in your county to do this for you versus doing it yourself. And the facilitator guide is really well written to make that option for you. So that may be something that you can think about as you figure out how to disseminate or use the Science Day kits. That's not what they're called anymore, but how to use them in your county. So, all right. So the first activity has to do with this little boat. So the sad part for me, here's the boat, is they gave you one boat. That's really enough to do an activity for maybe 2 or 3 kids. So if you plan to do this activity, you're either going to do it in stations and break the kids up, or you're going to need to order more stuff. So there's no way around it. So either partner with another county. That still only gives you 2 boats. They're submarines, actually, I think, or missiles. But really, like, this works for maybe 2 or 3 kids in order to engage and keep their interest. So what they do with this one is they put the missile together. So there's some, and I tried to find these on US Toy or something to see if you can order them cheaper. You cannot. At least I have not found them. You can order them on the 4-H website for $6 a piece. I ordered like 5 more, so I'll have them to probably loan out. I know Dawn was going to use some from me already. The good or bad news is I think you can reuse these without a problem, because it isn't about putting the missile together. It's about engaging in making it float in the middle of the water and talking about density. So really, like, you could do this with 2 kids and then rotate out another 2 kids, another 2 kids, that kind of thing. So it's not like you have to have everybody working on this at the same time. So that's a good thing. So the facilitator's guide and the youth guide have instructions. They're pretty easy to follow. What you do need, if you're using this missile thing, is you're going to need some type of container to put water in. They say a bucket will work. It's not about floating this way. It's about floating up and down. So as long as this fits in your container, it should be fine. So like a bucket, some totes, maybe the see-through ones would be easier. So you'll just need to make sure that you have those for each one of these. So like if I ordered 5, I'm going to need 6 total containers to put these in for the kids to work on them. They do come with some stickers. Here's the stickers. I always suggest not worrying about these because what's going to happen is your first group is going to get to put stickers on, and then your second group isn't going to get to put stickers on because you're going to disassemble it to use for the next group. So I don't think that the stickers is necessarily, unless you're just doing this once with 2 kids, then maybe use the stickers, but otherwise it's probably not a great idea to put those on there or put them out at the end, something. I just think it's going to cause a lot of angst. We just got done working with 4th, 5th, and 6th graders yesterday, and I just know how fairness is important to them, and making sure that we are fair is very, very important. So that's why I think it's probably not a great idea. So the really thing I like the most about this year's Science Day kit, and maybe they did these before and I didn't actually use them, but is these QR codes. Not the QR code necessarily, but they go to the actual researchers who use a similar piece of equipment, and they talk about how they use it and why they use it. And so it actually adds real life to it, and they're pretty well put together. So I would suggest, if you have the opportunity to show the videos, or the kids can, if they have iPads or whatever, they can watch them. They're actually pretty well put together. So basically, you're going to use these mission cards. I should have had this all laid out much better than I did, but okay, here they are. So you're going to, every group, so there are a total of 6 missions, which is why I think I ordered 5 of these yellow things that the kids can engage in. And the mission is basically they have to use this to do whatever the mission says. So they're going to read the mission card. And this submarine is basically a data collecting sub. So it goes down and it floats in the water and it collects data about the area that you're studying. So they could study the New Jersey coast, offshore Korea, the Indian Ocean, Antarctica, North Atlantic Ocean, and Monterey Bay. So you would have 6 options. So that way, if you had a group of 12, you divide them into 2 groups. If you had a group of 18, 3, or you'd buy another kit, and then you could do more too. So, but I really would not go past maybe 4, but that would be the max. So in the youth guide, they're going to fill out like basic information. It says, what city do you live in? Do you need to fly your airplane and your missile to get to your location, or can you just, drive there? How does this look? How are you going to get there? So there's some opportunities for them to do some research on what airports are near them, what airports are near the place where they're going, how would they get their stuff there? And so I think that's optional, but that's something that they could do. So then it says to put your thing together, which it may already be together if you use it with another group. So that part really isn't that important. But what you'll also need in addition to bringing tubs of water is you need stuff. So the goal is once you put this together to figure out how to get it to float in the middle of the water. So if this was the top of the water, this was the bottom, you're trying to figure out how to get it to float. So it's a math lessons on density. So if you're not great at that stuff, you may want to kind of do some math work ahead of time. But basically if it's floating in the middle, the density of the water and the density of the missile are the same. And so you have to put stuff inside of it to make it float. And so they suggest bringing coins. You can either have the kids figure out the density that it needs to be in order for it, how many grams need to go in here to make it float, or you can just tell them. And so there's a chart that basically says like, you want to get between 100 and 125 grams to make this float in the middle. And here are some things that can do that. And so you can use coins, the little glass gems, which I mean, like they're the round flat stones that you can, people stick on to make stepping stones and stuff like that. You can buy those at the dollar store or Walmart. They also have rocks from your yard. So depending on how much they're estimating that your rock will weigh 10 grams. So you might want to weigh out those rocks. You could get fishing weights. They're saying you can get sockets like you use with wrenches, and they have how much each of those weigh if you use the ones they suggest. Screws, washers, bolts, nuts, push pins, magnets, modeling clay, dried beans, popcorn kernels or rice, marbles, a house key, sand or soil. So those are the things in addition to the tub that you'll need to have with you, some of those things. And so you'll probably also want a scale. If you don't have one, my guess is that maybe the food nutrition program people in your office may have one, but I would get a scale so that the kids can measure out how many grams the stuff that they're doing is if you don't use the stuff that they're suggesting. So that way they know how to get it to about 125 so that it floats in the middle. So they're just basically going to work on getting it to float in the middle, and then they could also get it to float so it floats this way so they could add weight. But basically the goal of this lesson is to figure out how to make the missile float so it could collect data. And then if you want to, and so that's kind of what that activity is. And so when you're done with that activity, then they can also look at the back of that sheet. So this is the one, the offshore South Korea. The back has actual data that has been collected. You can even actually go to the website that they mentioned where you can see live data that's been collected, but this will talk about, this one's about temperatures in the water that the missile that was there has collected. And then they can go through and they can answer some data points on the bottom and fill out the rest of their form. So here they have, so what's in the youth guide after they go through is they have places where they can write some observations, and then they can figure out the density in this yellow box. How do you make your robot descend? How do you make your robot ascend? And then at the end, they get a little guide or pilot license. So I think the keys to remember here is you need to bring tub for water. You need to bring stuff so they can fill this up. And then I also know that you only have one of these, and really that's enough for 2 or 3 kids at a time. So that's just some things that I learned, or things that are concerning as you move forward when you do this, is that really, is this applicable, or how would you do this in a club? Maybe stations, engage a volunteer, maybe do it with a small group, or like I said, order some more of these plastic tube missiles. So are there any questions about the diving into data? Or has anybody done this with a group that would like to share successes, or maybe things that didn't go well? Okay, if you want to learn a lot more about this activity, the online resource that National 4-H put together is very much more in depth with lots of scientific things. I'm just giving you the ins and outs of this non-scientific person's opinion of what happened. Okay, so the second activity is a board game, kind of like last year, so ocean exploration. Again, this is probably geared for 6 to 12 kids. So if you have a bigger group than that, you can order these individual pieces, or maybe you can borrow in neighboring counties if you have more than that for kids. So in here, you're going to find action cards. I say this is a lot like Candyland, if I was going to like reference it to another game. So you're going to find these cards, and then you're going to find trivia question cards, these QR codes for pieces on the board game, cute little missile guys. There's 6. Oh, there's 5, 6. Yes. So there's 6. So that's why 6 kids can play. And then your instructions and your board. So if you'd open it up, if you have your kit with you, you'll see literally it kind of looks a little bit like a Candyland board game. Okay. So basically the idea is that you use these action cards to get everywhere. So they're going to shuffle these and pick one, and it says, engineer designs a new capture system to keep deep sea creatures alive at the surface, so you get to move ahead 4 spaces. And so all of them are like that. Some of them are red, or something bad happens, you have to move back 1 space. But basically that's how they get around the board. So the reason I think it'd be hard to play this in teams is there's not a lot of engagement for 2 people. So they would just have to take turns, which with 12 people may be a little bit much, which is kind of why I think it would be best served by individuals playing it. But again, I know our resources aren't unlimited, and so we may just have to make do with what you have. So then there's 2 ways to play the game. And on here, it tells you both ways. One is without trivia questions, and one is with trivia questions. So they basically say that if you land in you all have to stop at surface. So if I don't know if you have the boards with you, but basically like there's these little right here that says surface, you have to stop there no matter what. And if you land in a negative space, it says that you can either do nothing and skip your next turn, or they can choose to answer a trivia question and then they don't skip their turn and they get to move ahead 1 space. So, and if they're incorrect, they skip their next turn and move back 2 spaces. So it's kind of like this decision making. Do I want to answer the trivia question? And if I don't know it, I have to skip my next turn and move back 2 spaces. Or do I want to answer the trivia question and be able to go ahead? Or do I just want to hang out and do nothing? And that way I can just skip my turn. I don't have to go back 2 spaces. So there's that. And then if there's also the option of doing the trivia one, which the surface is where that would happen. And if they answer the trivia question correct, they get to advance 5 spaces. So that's kind of the option. I don't think it'll take that long. So once again, this could probably be done as a station if you were doing it that way. So these QR codes are, this is a frustration I have with this whole kit, is that very seldom do our kids have their own cell phones where they're scanning QR codes. But their idea was that if your kids were playing and they had a cell phone, they could scan the QR code that matches like the sea ice or stuck in gear, I think that's called, and they could see what that means. And then they could go and watch a video about those different locations. So that's kind of how that game works. It's pretty self-explanatory. The directions kind of go through everything. It wouldn't be super hard to play, but once again, the number of kids you can play it with is going to be limiting. So I again would suggest that you play it with 6 to 12 kids. If you have more than that, you probably need to get a second set of stuff. All right, so that's the first and second parts of the And then the last one is really about creating a change project, as far as I can tell. So it's called Ocean Communicator, and I dropped all the cards down here on the floor. But there are 6, I believe, cards. Let's see if I'm correct. Well, there's 6 cards, and each one has a picture like this, and then it has some facts and what the challenge is. So the challenge on this one is that overfishing is the harvesting of wildlife from the sea at rates too high for species to replace their population. So your job is to then so there's 6 days, they select a set. As this one, you could do a little bit bigger groups, probably like 3 or 4 easily without a problem. And then they're going to use this template that's found inside of their youth guide to then create a PSA or a public service announcement about what they want to do. So the other option, so the options for the PSA are you could do a take action plan. You could create an art piece. You could write a letter to your local editor or state representative, or you could do a short poem, story, or song. So the kids get to then, so this is very unscience-y in some ways. It's more of an art kind of project or a creativity project, which is great, adding a little bit of diversity to our Science Day kits. But basically that's what their goal is with these. And so the 4-H Strong is in their books, and it's basically like, use your head. What's the problem? Explain the ocean challenge you want to address, and then use your heart. Why should we care about it? Use your hands. What's the solution? Can you explain an innovative idea you have to solve the problem? And the health is, how would this challenge meet or solve the problem to restore the ocean's health? And then who are you sharing your message with? So basically, they're creating a PSA. I honestly think that if you wanted to do this, you could even do it locally. So if you have some water issues or other issues in your own community, you can add in some of those in addition to the ones that they give you. But basically they give you the scenario, and then the kids have to become engineers and think about how they would solve that problem. And then they need to present that in some way, shape, or form. So those are the 3 activities. And then when they're done, you can print them off a certificate if you want. And if you don't have enough, because there's, I think, only 6 youth guides in here, you could then, of course, copy that and paste that. So those are the ins and outs of the Science Day kit from a non-sciencey person who can help you think through how you're going to use this in your communities. And like I said, there's the opportunity to order some more supplies. So if you think you're going to use this for larger groups, I would get on that and get some more supplies ordered and make sure that you're ready. But you can reuse the little missiles. The board game can be reused, and obviously this Ocean Communicator can be reused. So it's not something that you go in one and done. For those of you who did, maybe it was last year, the year before, we had to build robots for the Mars mission. And once you built them, it was kind of like a done deal. This is not that kind of a kit. The great news is that it's super reusable. So you could do it with one group 1 hour, and then you could go and do it with another group the next hour, and you won't have any problems trying to do that. So that is what I have. I will entertain any questions. And as always, you can call me if you run into problems, but I'm not a scientist. I just pretend to care. So not care, pretend to know what sciencey stuff's going on in the world. So. All right, well, that is all I have. I'm not going to keep you any longer than I have to. I'll record this and send this out. So if you want to watch it or ask questions, once that recording is out, you're more than welcome to, but that's kind of the ins and outs of the Science Day kits. And we will have some of these tubes that you could loan out. Mary Louise and I are doing an activity on October 3rd. So after that, I won't need them anymore. I think Dawn's doing one with ours at the end of the month, but throughout that time, if you'd like to borrow them or borrow a neighbor's, feel free to ask them for that information. So, all right, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you tomorrow where you can learn about Achievement Day information and get all of that lined out. So have a great day.